You think we can build cooling into the hoods on road bikes?
Depends a lot on the UCI and what they want us to do around like onboard technologies. I mean, I'm a big fan of increasing the weight limit. I think I've been, I've said it a few times, everyone's like, are you mental? We want super light bikes. It's like, well, do we? Like if you've got an 8 kilo bike, suddenly you can throw loads of cool technology out. Imagine like front and rear GoPro, all the like live onboard data, even like microphones in the Peloton, which I think probably a few people might be against. Like, I mean, you and I have both been in the Peloton. It's not always the most pleasant place. But like the insight from a fan engagement perspective would be absolutely game changing. And I'm an advocate for it. With the UCI listening or not, we'll wait and see. But I think that would enable things like onboard cooling, which may become a necessity in 10, 20 years' time. I don't know. But it's a hard thing to do efficiently in small things because effectively it's energy. So like if you look at a fridge, it's cool on the inside, but it's hot on the outside, and it's the energy required to work a fridge pump, and same kind of concept. Hence why, to go back to the ice point, you're eating loads of ice, and it's the changing of the ice to a liquid. It's called phase change. It takes a lot of energy, and then you raise the temperature of that liquid, and then you sweat it out, and then changing to a gas, and again, that takes a lot of energy.
How much of your job as an engineer is trying to work within the UCI limits, and how much is there like a latitude for you petitioning or your team petitioning the UCI to change regulations?
So proactive changing of regulations is pretty rare, I would say. It's something that I try to push for and I make suggestions, and there's kind of different avenues for that. I have a good relationship with Andre, who's now the head of the materials department. He took over Michael Rogers' role when Michael left. I don't think when that was, probably 4, 5, 6 months ago now. But then there's another avenue, which is the World Federation Sporting Goods Industries. So they're like a lobbying group of all like the big sporting goods people within the industry. So like your Zips, your Vittorias, your Continentals, Hoop, they actually on that committee. So I can kind of sit on those meetings, and then you can kind of influence, and they're kind of a bit of give and take. So sometimes it'll be the industry saying, we don't like this rule, it needs to change, or it needs to go in this direction. Sometimes it's the UCI coming the other way of actually, we want to try and ban this or change that or limit this. What do you think? How should that be done? So that it doesn't ever really particularly come as a surprise, at least to the big players in the industry. Sometimes to the small guys, you're not really involved. And then often the UCI will approach the small people as well. So I've sat in meetings with like us, Aero Coach, Velo Bike, Ride Sim, so like those small niche kind of startup brands of the last few years, sitting there with the UCI talking about like cockpit designs, whether that's like drop bars, extensions, that kind of thing. And really on the track side, that's where most of the development's being done within those kind of small niche brands, which is pretty cool because your big players don't seem to get involved in that arena quite so much. So that the hotbed of track aero is more the kind of niche designers, which is quite nice. But day to day, realistically, it's more about trying to work within the rules as they're written. And then the UCI typically will go, well, actually, that wasn't really the intent of the rule. We'd rather you didn't do that. And then you kind of have this to and fro of actually what's the intent versus what is the actual written rule, and where do we meet in the middle normally?
So I'm kind of big on my undergrads in economics before I moved across to law. And large parts of economics are based on incentives. And with the incentive for performance, we're so highly incentivized to eke out gains for speed, to eke out gains for aerodynamics, for grip, for rolling resistance. We're so poorly incentivized to innovate around safety. And that's why I would love to see that weight limit going up. And, you know, as an ex-rider and someone who's a lot of friends still in the peloton, you know, safety is such a huge problem. You know, Gino passing away last year, you know, there's bad crashes in, you know, every country in the world at a local level every weekend. But there's so little innovation in terms of safety as well. Like, as an engineer, is that frustrating, or is it just you have to focus on what you're paid to focus on?
It is frustrating. It was actually one of the first discussion points I had when I went to meet Red Bull. One of the head senior guys at Red Bull was like, what do you think about safety in cycling? You're like, oh, caught off guard. Thought you might ask about skin suits. But it's a genuine problem. How you tackle it, I think there's a lot of different ideas. I think a lot of it is going to it's going to have to force onto riders. I think riders right now are very anti things like, for example, like additional layers in your clothing that help when you crash to deal with road rash, etc. I think it was a survey done by the CPA, and most riders said, no, I don't want it. Which is kind of a bit like if you rewind decades when people are like, oh, do you want seatbelts? No, I'm fine.
Yeah.
It's like you get thrown from the vehicle, it's okay. It's like, well, no, it's not okay.
And that makes such a difference. Even like, I'm sure you've crashed with a base layer and without a base layer. Like the difference in terms of road rash, it's insane.
But then it's the UCI who have to either regulate for it or encourage it. And quite often the opposite has happened. I've heard of manufacturers going to the UCI, do you mind if we put this in? And then they get their back up thinking, oh, maybe it's an aero intervention that we should ban. It's like, no, people being proactive on safety, but then the riders don't want it because it's 50 grams heavier. And it's like, how do you tackle that? Weight limits.
Yeah.
But it's a big old problem. I mean, there's other things, isn't there? Like how safe are descents, catch nets, pre-warnings. We just had Wow crash out with Vuelta when he was on his way to win probably a couple of jerseys. And that was a corner that wasn't signposted, but was when they last used it a few years ago. And why has that changed? Because they clearly assessed it a few years ago and said, well, it's unsafe. Why is it suddenly okay now?
Yeah, and it seems like we've talked about ChatGPT. It seems like this is a paid ad for ChatGPT. We're mentioning it so much. But like a big data approach to this, it must surely be attractive as an engineer, where we look and we analyze every single race, every single crash that's happened, and start like penalizing races with poor safety records and incentivizing them to have safer corners, have more marshals on corners, route around, potential. If a crash has been on the same corner 5 out of the last 5 years, like should that corner be in the race?
Exactly that. But it needs to be independent at the same time. I think Safer Cycling are maybe a group who are doing that, and they assess a lot of the races and then give recommendations to the organizer. But the organizer isn't required to adhere to those. And I think it happened back at the big Exulia crash when Jonas and Remco, I mean, let's be honest, nearly died. They had some pretty serious injuries. And that was raised in the Safer Cycling report, but wasn't addressed by the race organizer. So again, it falls on this kind of like triangle of race organizers, independent safety, and the UCI to somehow regulate and say, you have to meet these. We've had it in other ones like sprinting. Was it Tour of Poland? They always had a stupid downhill sprint finish.
Stupid downhill sprint, where Jakobsen and Groenewegen nearly killed each other.
And yet, what happens? What changes? I might say it needs incentivizing, but doesn't seem the UCI really take it seriously as a problem. Like bury their heads in the sand.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please click up here. There's another video I know that you're absolutely going to love. And click over here and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our amazing upcoming guests.